Hello everyone, welcome to our presentation about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on import and export, the evidence from Singapore. I'm Dawei and my group member is Yuan and Jiamin. First, let's look at our content of the presentation. First, we have the introduction and the research background part. And second, we have research method. And about research method, we'll also talk about our hypothesis. And using this method, we will get our research findings. Based on the findings, we will discuss about the findings and finally make a conclusion about our presentation. So first, I'm going to talk about the introduction of our research. And the first part is the research background. As we know, the COVID-19 virus as a worldwide pandemic make an unexpected terrible effect on each country's economic, critically on the import and export trade environment, and gradually effect on currency exchange rate and business cycle in each country. And as we know, Singapore as a country rely on import-export trade, tourism, and third-party service industry, faced an incredible situation. The Administration of Trade and Industries 2020, the Department of Singapore report that the forecast of Singapore GDP will downward to -7% to -4%. Nearly 14 industries, including transportation, food service, manufacturing, will be affected by the epidemic. And the stay-home policy and foreign control policy destroyed the relevant industry to tourism, retailing business, and the retailing sales volume instantly drops down at the beginning period of this disaster. Our research is based on the economic environment, try to figure out the impact of COVID-19 virus to Singapore import-export by integrating the data under the appropriate critical literature review to demonstrate clear methodology to reach a further position to this topic research. Okay, so second, based on the background, we comes out three research questions and the hypothesis. The first question is a proper level of protectionism, which means import protection as an export promotion policy effectiveness in Singapore market under the impact of COVID-19. And the second question is, will COVID-19 affect the pattern of Singapore's business cycle? And the third question is there a direction for Singapore to adjust the exchange policy to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic period? Thus, the following objectives that the research target to achieve. First target is to determine the proper level of protectionism is effective in Singapore market. And the second question is to determine Singapore's traditional business cycle model has been effective and affected under the influence of COVID-19. And the third question is to determine there is a direction for Singapore to adjust the exchange policy to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic period. And then let's talk about our research method. In the research method part, they have 5 parts. The first one is discussion part. In the discussion part, we determine the scope of the data and we find out what kind of data we are collecting. And for the second data part, we collect raw data information from January 2020 until the May of 2020. The data information is from Administration of Trade and Industry and from the Singapore Department of Statistics and the Monetary Authority of Singapore. And the third part is a calculation. After we collecting all the primary merchandise trade data, including import and export, oil and non-oil, and other specific items, and also the Singapore dollar to USD dollars, the exchange rate from 2000 until 2020. We analyzed and calculating the primary data month to month, year to year. Based on this data, we calculating the net value of merchandise imports and export, the growth rate of import and export, the annually and the growth rate of import-export month to month. After that, we draw the graph of net value of import and export, oil and non-oil. We draw the figure of specific items like manufactured goods, foods, beverage, and animals. We also draw the graph of annual growth rate line chart and month-to-month rate line chart. After we draw the graph, we using the SPSS analysis software to do the further analysis. We use the SPSS software to discuss the inner connection between each categories of our data. Okay, I will pass to my partner Yuan to discuss further.
Hello everyone, I'm Yuan, and the part I'm going to discuss is findings of the analysis. This chapter and the following related reports discuss the findings of the Singapore import and export trade over the past 20 years, and involves the core of the paper. This chapter introduces the data that form the basis of the service and involves and analyze that present the result of the data analysis. Qualitative research will also be involved and the series of chapters and given in detail. The following will illustrate the results according to the charts. Okay, the first part is the qualitative findings. Figure 1 and 2 show the monthly growth rate of the Singapore imports and exports from the 2000 to 2020. In general, the growth rate of the imports and exports are very similar, and the frequency of the fraction is also similar. First, look at the import growth rate. In February 2006, the import growth rate reached the peak of the past 20 years. In 2009, exports for June and July, the import growth rate dropped its lowest value. From the perspective of export growth rate, it has been rising since 2000 and reached a 20 years peak in December 2003. The showed a downward trend, especially when it reached the bottom in January 2009. In Figure 3, Singapore's crude oil imports and export net value and the exchange rate between 2000 and 2020 are shown. We can see that compared to the net import and export value of the crude oil, the exchange rate has stabilized, but has been showing the downward trend. In Figure 4, Singapore's non-oil net import and export value and exchange rate between 2000 and 2020 are shown. It can be seen that compared with non-oil's net import and export values, the exchange rate has stabilized but declined slightly in 2008 and start to pick up in 2009, but it has been showing a slight downward trend. Okay, the next part is the SPSS analysis. Okay, using the SPSS software, we first did one simple test with the total machine dense import and export data and obtained of the first of the simple test table from figure 5. In the result of the one simple test, we noticed that the p-value is equal to 0 for both total merchandise input and total merchandise export. So we believe that the average value between the two sets of the total inputs and the total exports are not equal. After one simple test, we analyze three sets in the descriptive statistic table. We can see the mean value, standard deviation median, and max median value of the three sets of the data. We found that Singapore's exchange rate against the US dollar remained relatively stable between 1.2 and 1.85. Okay, after that, we separately took out the data of Singapore commercial inputs and the Singapore to dollar exchange rate to draw a line chart of the changes using the SPSS software. From the chart, we can see that the exchange rate of the mean of Singapore to USD showed a downward change from 2000 to September 2011. For 2011 until May 2020, the Singapore to US dollar exchange rate has steadily increased. At the same time, Singapore's inputs grew rapidly from 2000 to 2008, but in 2008, Singapore's inputs were affected by the economic crisis and declined from 2009 to 2011. Imports gradually picked up and returned to the before level. Imports entered a circle of the decline from 2011 to 2015, and from 2015 to 2018. Input reached a new peak until 2020, with a COVID-19 outbreak. Of course, inputs have once again fallen sharply. But we can see the currency exchange rate of the Singapore to US dollar has not changed significantly. Okay, finally, we use the two sets of the data of the Singapore's total inputs and the total exports from the 2000 to 2020 to plot the scatter plot and total merchandise inputs and exports. For this scatter plot, we can find that the graphs connected by points of the inputs and the exports learned of. We can find that there is strong positive relationships between Singapore's inputs and exports data. At the same time, the fewer inputs, the more corresponding exports. The fewer inputs, the fewer corresponding exports. Okay, so next speaker is Jiamin.
Hello everyone, my name is Jiamin Yu. Today I'm going to talk about the discussion and conclusion part of research. We have total 3 questions from the research funding. For the first one is protectionism policy evaluation. Numerically analysis, we found that the relationship between the total import and total export is given as a linear equation shown on the slide, and it shows a proportional relationship between the two elements. And we also found that it can prove the protectionism is numerically suitable for current situation. For theoretical analysis, Singapore government trying to avoid domestic economy facing economic depression. So government try to protect local industry by set up import substitution and reduce the tax fee to reduce the pressure of the industry company break down. Then they can control the unemployment rate and inflation. For our second question is about the impact of the business cycle. We found that the business cycle has a similarity between those countries that have a lot of business trade or they are in the same economic group. And we know that Singapore is belong to the APEC economic group, and China, Japan, Korea, those countries are also involved in that. And those countries are also affected by the COVID-19 in their economic situation, and we believe that Singapore has also a similar business cycle compared to these countries. And we also found that in 2019, Singapore reached lowest GDP growth in past 10 years, and the government are forced to recover the economic by recover their productivity of industry, but because of COVID-19 pandemic impact on the export industry, so that the recovery of the economy period should be extended for several years. And also for globalization, the United States as the world's largest economy, and they also own the world currency. But in COVID-19 pandemic, it become hottest hit area, and their economy is badly affected by this pandemic. We know that Singapore is has a lot of trade cooperation with United States, so that the business cycle should be affected by United States as well. The third question is about the direction of the exchange rate policy, and we choose United States dollar as the research target because it has more research value by it is world currency. So the current situation show on the left side of the upper sides in that diagram show from January to March 2020, the exchange rate reached a huge increase because US dollar has devaluation by bad situation of COVID-19. But from March to April, it happened a decline in the exchange rate because pandemic effect is spreading in Singapore as well. And for political direction, we stress protectionism as the most suitable policy for stabilizing Singapore dollar exchange, because devaluation is most caused by the domestic economic depression than the inflation. And for conclusion, we stress the government should predict the further situation of the economic, and by using SPSS or other statistic analyzing tool to give a further political strategy to avoid the lasting of the COVID-19 pandemic, to stagnation on the GDP growth of the Singapore. We also stress the using some SPSS to numerically conclude the relationship between each economic elements to conclude a series or formula for further forecasting of the economic situation. And we also expect for they can to end the pandemic for recover the economy. That's the end of the presentation, and thanks for listening and watching.